Hi, my name is Mark Cooper. I'm the Harbour Master at Dart Harbour Navigation Authority. This is the third of a series of videos on the waiting list, and how to apply for a waiting list position, and how to apply for a mooring using the waiting list. If you're watching this video, you should have watched the first video, which was just setting up the initial thoughts about where you wanted to be, how you were going to park your car, get to the mooring, how you're going to use it. Very basic. The second video then went into more detail about geographic position and the graphs that are available on the website in the waiting list analysis that was done in the spring of 2020. This final video is really aimed at those people who know they like the idea of owning a vessel. They may have some idea of the type of vessel they want to buy, or in some cases not, and they know they want to have the vessel on the Dart, or perhaps more than one vessel. If that's you, you're watching the right video. If you're not, no need to watch this one. If you already own a vessel, no need to watch this. The waiting lists. In the last video, I talked a little bit about how the curves and the graphs worked. I'm going to go back on and show you now go back to one of the graphs that was shown, just to try and explain how boat length can be important in terms of getting a mooring. So, going back onto the PowerPoint screen. There we go. So you should be able to see this graph now. It's the third graph that accompanies all of the geographic areas. Now, clearly, if you want to buy a vessel and you want to be allocated a mooring really quickly in this area, wherever this graph is supposed to be, it's an example. The best size of vessel to have is probably down here. You probably want a 6 to 7 meter vessel, because there's quite a few moorings there. You might want an 8 meter vessel. That's quite good as well. Look, 8 meters, only 8 people there. And if you're down at this end of the graph here, you do the maths. Let's have a look. 8, 8, 16, 22. So 22 people down this end of the graph. You include these 25. And then you've actually got 28 berths available. So the stats are pretty good down here. There'll be quite a lot of movement down here. When you get to the next bit of the graph, clearly demand outstrips is a bigger number than the number of berths available. So you're going to wait longer, particularly in here, 10, 11, 12 meters. So you're going to wait a long time in here. So if you can choose a vessel based on size, it's worth just considering those limitations. I know that's fairly obvious, but I wanted to point that out. The next factor that's not, it's talked about in the waiting list analysis, is the draft of the vessel. Clearly, when you get at river and you get to swinging moorings up at the top of the river there, or beyond Nos, swinging moorings, they take up a lot of space. They're very nice. You've got a block and a chain, and then generally a piece of rope before the buoy, and then you put your chains or your ropes onto the buoy and tie yourself up. It's great because generally the boat sits clear of the buoy unless there's a bit of wind over the tide, which means your boat's not really touching anything. It's just got a line over the bow if you've done it properly, and it's just hanging off the buoy. When you come alongside the buoy to pick it up, it's really easy because you can judge the conditions. You've got generally a lot of space. You can point into the tidal stream and the wind, whichever's prevailing. And generally, it's a pretty easy job to pick up a mooring line off a buoy, sometimes a small float on the end, and pick it up and tie up to. So they're great moorings to have, relatively easy to use if you're short-handed or single-handed. Problem is they take up a lot of space. We're allowed to move moorings around the river, so we move some of the ones that are not let and put them in the areas that are most popular. But clearly, we're trying to find, when we do that, the areas where we're able to put buoys in relatively deep water. But there's a limitation on the deep water, so we've just about populated pretty much all the areas where we think we can let moorings, where there is space and it's in deep water. But we've also got some other moorings that are swinging moorings in water that's not so deep. And we categorize our moorings depending on the depth of water that's available at mean low water springs. Mean low water springs in Dart is 0.6 of a metre. So that means if you get one of our deeper moorings, a category A mooring we call them, then the berth generally has 3 metres or more of water at low water springs. That means practically for most yachts, draw less than 2 metres, some draw 2.5. Even for those guys, they're going to have 3 metres at low water. They're going to float pretty much all the time, and they might just need to move for the really odd, astronomically low tide. For a lot of vessels, they'll fit in a Category B mooring. Category B is those berths where it's relatively shallow. The depth of water at low water springs is between 1 metre and 3 metres, so depending where the mooring is. But even with 1 metre, there's enough water there for most boats. You might want to move them if there are protrusions below the keel at certain astronomic tides. But generally, there's a reasonable number of Category B moorings. And Category C, clearly they're less than a metre depth at mean low water springs, so there's a pretty good chance there that your vessel will touch the bottom at some point, which is fine if you've got a bilge keel or you've got a boat that you're happy to sit on the bottom with decent keels and decent stability. Now, clearly, if you have a 10-metre vessel and it draws half a metre, you can take a Cat A, B or C mooring. If you've got one that draws 2 metres, you need to be up at a Cat A mooring. So the guy who's got the motorboat with a shallow draft has much more chance of moving through of getting a mooring allocated. Why am I telling you this? If you haven't bought your vessel yet, as well as boat length, draft is really important. At the moment on the river, there are certain areas where we have a number of 8 to 10 metre moorings. There are the shallow ones where they're Category C, so they're less than a metre at low water springs. And we can't let them. And in the same areas, we might have 40, 50 people on the waiting list whose boat length is within the specification of the mooring, but their draft is much deeper than the moorings available. So the Category C, the shallower moorings, they're generally harder to let. Now that means if you go and buy yourself a racing yacht that's 30 feet long and you buy one with a lifting keel, you can fit on a Category C mooring. So you're going to be far easier for us to give you a mooring. It's going to be far easier for us to give you a mooring, and you're going to move through the list much quicker. So if you do have a choice, have a look at the designs that are available, have a look at the boat length, and take into account the draft. And it's not just lifting keels, of course. If you have a catamaran, they tend to be shallower draft, and the advantage of a catamaran is it will sit very evenly on any mud at very low tide, so you're not worried about the thing bottoming out at low water. So have a look at that. It's really important if you haven't bought a vessel to come and talk to us. Clearly, the mooring stock I talked about in the second video is important. You know, you can see what's there, you can see what the stock is, get some idea of how you'll move through the list. It's a really good idea to come and talk to us when you've watched all 3 videos and you've started to fill in the form. Come and have a chat, and if you haven't bought a vessel yet, just talk to us about the moorings that are available. In lots of cases, people buy a small vessel, get used to using it, get worked up, and then they want a bigger vessel. At that point as well, it's really, really important that you come and talk to us, because we've had people who have a mooring for a long time, they just upgrade the vessel by a metre and then they find that there's no mooring available for them, so they're disappointed. So please, hope you got what you wanted from these videos. Have a look at the waiting list analysis and have a look at the forms, start filling them in. Once you go as far as you can, that's the time to come into the office and sit down with one of the staff. They'll take you through the process. Thank you.